The blood on Felicity Harper's hands had long since dried, but the memory of how it got there still woke her in cold sweats 3 towns back. She pressed her palm against the worn leather trunk at the foot of her rented bed, feeling the weight of secrets folded beneath her spare dresses, and the pistol she prayed she would never have to use again. Inside that trunk, hidden between the pages of a water-damaged Bible, was a poster with her face sketched in harsh lines, offering $500 for information leading to her capture. Eldorado Canyon, Nevada was supposed to be different. The mining town sat nestled in the rocky desert landscape, close enough to the Colorado River that water was not a constant worry, far enough from civilization that questions were not always asked. Felicity had arrived on a Wednesday in July of 1877, stepping off the stagecoach with dust in her hair and exhaustion in her bones. She was 22 years old and had been running for 8 months. The boarding house, where she took a room, smelled of lye soap and tobacco. The proprietor, a widow named Mrs. Chen whose husband had died in a tunnel collapse, asked no questions beyond whether Felicity could pay weekly in advance. The room was small but clean, with a window overlooking the main street where miners stumbled between the saloon and the assay office, their pockets temporarily heavy with silver. Felicity found work at the general store, which was owned by a German immigrant who appreciated her neat handwriting and honest face. She kept the books, minded the counter when he made deliveries, and learned the rhythms of a town built on hope and backbreaking labor. She kept her head down and her past locked tight in that trunk. It was a month before she truly noticed Nathan Ellis. He had been there all along, of course. A tall man with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled at his collar, he ran cattle on the scrubland outside town and came in twice a week for supplies. He was quiet in the way of men who spent most of their time alone, but his eyes were kind when he thanked her for wrapping his purchases. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with the lean build of someone who worked from dawn to dusk, and calloused hands that handled his money carefully. The first time they had a real conversation, Felicity was restocking shelves with tins of peaches. Nathan had come in for rope and ammunition, and while she was tallying his order, he commented on the book she had tucked beneath the counter. "Wuthering Heights," he said, reading the spine. "That is a heavy choice for a hot afternoon." Felicity felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I like stories about people who feel things deeply, even when those feelings lead them to ruin." He was not mocking her. His expression was genuinely curious. "Especially then," she said softly. "It makes them more real." Nathan paid for his goods but lingered an extra moment. "I have a sister back in Kansas. She used to read to me when I was young. I never had much patience for sitting still, but I liked the sound of her voice making those words come alive." "You see her often?" Felicity asked. Something shifted in his expression. "She died of fever 6 years ago. Her husband and children too. I came out west after that. Could not stand that empty house." "I am sorry," Felicity said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised her. Nathan nodded once, then tipped his hat and left. But something had been established between them, a recognition of shared grief, even if the details remained unspoken. After that, their conversations grew longer. Nathan began timing his visits to the store for the slower parts of the afternoon, when Felicity could talk without constantly serving other customers. He told her about his small ranch, about the dozen cattle he was trying to build into a real herd, about the spring he had found in the hills where the water ran cold even in August. She told him carefully edited stories about growing up in Missouri, about her mother who had died when she was 14, about learning to shoot because her father had no sons. She did not tell him about her father's debts, about the man he had promised her to in marriage, about the night that man had come to claim his property and put his hands on her with whiskey on his breath. She did not tell him about the shotgun blast that had left Marcus Turnbull bleeding out on the kitchen floor, or about running while her father screamed at her that she had ruined them both. The wanted poster had appeared 2 weeks after she fled. She had seen it in a town in Colorado, her own face staring back at her above the word murder. Some afternoons, Nathan brought Felicity small things: a cluster of wildflowers that grew near his spring, a smooth river stone that fit perfectly in her palm. Once, a book of poetry that he admitted buying from a traveling peddler specifically because he thought she might like it. These gifts made her chest ache with something that felt dangerously close to hope. By September, Felicity understood that she was falling in love with Nathan Ellis, and the knowledge terrified her. She had no right to love anyone, not with her past crouched in that trunk like a coiled snake. But her heart paid no attention to rights or reason. It beat faster when she heard his boots on the store's wooden steps. It sang when he smiled at something she said. It broke a little each time he left, because she knew that eventually she would have to leave too. The town was preparing for a harvest dance, though what exactly was being harvested in the desert was unclear. It seemed more an excuse for celebration, for the women to wear their best dresses and the men to wash the dust from their hair. Nathan asked Felicity to accompany him with an endearing awkwardness, stumbling over his words in a way that made her want to kiss him right there in the middle of the general store. "I would like that very much," she said instead. She made a new dress for the occasion, using fabric she purchased at cost from her employer. The cotton was a soft blue that reminded her of early morning skies, and she stayed up late by lamplight, stitching careful seams. It had been a long time since she had made something pretty for herself. It felt like a small rebellion against the fear that shadowed her days. The night of the dance, Nathan arrived at the boarding house with his hair neatly combed and his cleanest shirt pressed. He wore his revolver on his hip because this was still the Nevada territory, and a man went armed, but he had polished the leather of his gun belt until it gleamed. He looked at Felicity in her blue dress as though she had hung the moon, and she felt beautiful for the first time in months. The dance was held in the largest saloon, with the gambling tables pushed to the walls and a 3-piece band imported from Las Vegas. Minors danced with shop girls and prostitutes, and the Chinese laundress world passed in the arms of the blacksmith. For a few hours, the hard edges of frontier life softened into something almost gentle. Nathan was not a graceful dancer, but he was earnest, and he held Felicity as though she were something precious. They swayed together to a waltz, his hand warm against her back, and she let herself imagine a different life. One where she could stay in Eldorado Canyon, where she could build something real with this good man who brought her river stones and poetry. Between dances, they stepped outside for air. The night was cool, the sky shattered with stars. Nathan stood close enough that Felicity could feel the heat of him. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. Her stomach dropped. This was it. Someone had recognized her. The law was coming. She would have to run again tonight, leaving behind this brief taste of happiness. "I am not good with words," Nathan continued. "Not the fancy kind you find in books, but I need you to know that these past months getting to know you have been the best I have had in a very long time. You make me think that maybe there is more to life than just surviving, that maybe I could build something worth having." "Nathan," she whispered. "I know we have not known each other long," he said, "and I know you have things in your past that you are not ready to talk about. I can see it in your eyes sometimes that far away look like you are ready to bolt, but I want you to know that I am not going anywhere, and if you decide to stay, I will be here." Tears stung Felicity's eyes. She wanted to tell him everything, to lay her sins out in the starlight and let him decide if she was worth the trouble. But the words stuck in her throat, tangled up with fear. Instead, she kissed him. She rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his, tasting salt and hope. He made a surprised sound, then pulled her closer, his arms banding around her as though he could keep her safe from everything that chased her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I will take that as a good sign," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. They went back inside for another dance, then another. Felicity let herself live in each moment, storing them up like provisions for the lean times she knew were coming. She memorized the way Nathan looked at her, the warmth of his hand, the sound of his laughter when she teased him about his 2 left feet. The trouble arrived on a Tuesday. Felicity was working in the store, taking inventory of the flour and sugar, when 2 men walked in wearing trail dust and hard expressions. They were not miners or ranchers. Their clothes were too fine, their gun belts worn with the ease of frequent use. One was tall and thin with a drooping mustache. The other was compact and mean-looking, with a scar that bisected his left eyebrow. "Help you gentlemen?" her employer asked. The tall one pulled a folded paper from his pocket and smoothed it open on the counter. "We are looking for this woman. $500 reward for information." Felicity's blood turned to ice. She was in the back room, visible through the open doorway, but the men had not looked her way yet. She forced herself to stay calm, to keep counting tins of peaches as though her world was not collapsing. "Cannot say I have seen her," the store owner said, "but I will keep an eye out." "She might have changed her appearance," the scarred man said. "Different hair, different clothes, but she has a birthmark on her left wrist shaped like a crescent moon." Felicity's left hand instinctively moved to cover her right wrist, where no such mark existed. But then she realized her mistake. The birthmark was on her right wrist, and now she had drawn attention to it. The bounty hunters were looking at her now, their gazes sharp and assessing. She met their eyes steadily, praying her face would not betray her. "I hope you find her," she said. $500 is a lot of money." The tall man studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Much obliged for your time." They left, but Felicity knew it was not over. They had seen her, and whether they had recognized her immediately or just had suspicions, they would be watching. She finished her shift on shaking legs, her mind racing through options. She could leave tonight, slip away in the darkness. But the thought of never seeing Nathan again, of not even saying goodbye, was unbearable. She went back to the boarding house and pulled her trunk from under the bed. Her hands trembled as she opened it, rifling through her few possessions until she found the Bible with the wanted poster pressed between its pages. Her own face stared back at her, younger and harder than she felt now. "Wanted for murder. Felicity Harper. $500 reward." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She had been foolish to think she could ever have a normal life. The past did not stay buried, no matter how deep you tried to dig the hole. A knock at the door made her jump. She shoved the poster back into the Bible and thrust it into the trunk, slamming the lid. "Who is it?" "It is Nathan." Her heart lurched. She could not see him, not now, not when she was barely holding herself together, but she found herself opening the door anyway. Nathan stood in the hallway with his hat in his hands. One look at her face and his expression shifted to concern. "What happened?" "Nothing. I am fine." "You are a terrible liar, Felicity Harper." He stepped into the room without invitation, closing the door behind him. "Talk to me." She shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself. "You should go." "Not until you tell me what has you looking like you have seen a ghost." The words spilled out before she could stop them. There were men in the store today, bounty hunters. They were looking for someone. Nathan's jaw tightened. Were they looking for you? The question hung in the air between them. Felicity could lie, could deny it and hope he would drop the subject, but she was so tired of lying, of carrying this weight alone. Yes, she whispered. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Tell me what happened. All of it." So she did. She told him about her father's gambling debts, about Marcus Turnbull, who had paid those debts in exchange for her hand in marriage. About the wedding that was supposed to happen in the morning, and Turnbull coming to her room the night before, drunk and impatient. About fighting him off, about the shotgun her father kept loaded by the door, about the way Turnbull's face had looked when he realized she was serious. "He came at me anyway," she said, her voice breaking. "He said I was his property and he could do what he wanted, so I shot him. I did not mean to kill him. I just wanted him to stop. But he fell, and there was so much blood, and my father was screaming at me to run before the sheriff came." She sank down onto the bed, her whole body shaking. "So I ran. I have been running ever since. And I know that makes me a murderer in the eyes of the law, but Nathan, I swear to you, I did not have a choice." Nathan set his hat on the small table and knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes, expecting to see disgust or fear. Instead, she saw something that looked like fury but not directed at her. "That was not murder," Nathan said fiercely. "That was self-defense. That man tried to force himself on you, and you protected yourself. There is no shame in that. The law does not see it that way. Then the law is wrong." He squeezed her hands. "Felicity, I need you to understand something. What you just told me does not change how I feel about you. If anything, it makes me respect you more. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. I am a coward. I ran instead of staying to face what I had done." "You are a survivor," Nathan corrected. "And thank God you ran, because otherwise you would be dead or locked in a cell for defending yourself against a man who thought he owned you." Felicity stared at him, unable to process that he was not leaving. That he was kneeling here in her rented room, holding her hands and looking at her like she was someone worth fighting for. "Those bounty hunters," she said. "If they figure out it is me, they will take me back to Missouri. I will hang Nathan. They do not care that I had no choice." "Then we make sure they do not figure it out." His voice was calm, determined. "You said they asked about a birthmark," she nodded. "On the left wrist, shaped like a crescent moon." Nathan turned her hands over, examining both wrists. "You do not have any such mark." "No. I think someone gave them false information, maybe to claim the reward, but they are still suspicious. They looked at me, Nathan, they saw me. Then we change what they see." He stood up, pacing the small room. "Your hair, we can cut it, change the style. Different clothes, maybe. And we should probably keep you out of the store for a few days until they move on. I cannot hide forever." "You are not hiding. You are being smart." He stopped pacing and looked at her. "Unless you want to leave Eldorado Canyon. If you think you would be safer somewhere else, I will help you get there. I will give you money, supplies, whatever you need." The offer was genuine. She could see it in his face. He would let her go if that was what she wanted, even though it would hurt him. "I do not want to leave," she said quietly. "I want to stay, but I am scared." Nathan sat down beside her on the bed, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I am scared too, but I meant what I said at the dance. I am not going anywhere. We will figure this out together." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. He put his arm around her, and for the first time since those bounty hunters had walked into the store, Felicity felt like she could breathe. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just taking comfort in each other's presence. Finally, Nathan said, "I should go before the widow Chen starts gossiping, but I will come by tomorrow. We will make a plan." Felicity walked him to the door. Before he left, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep. It is going to be all right." She wanted to believe him. After he left, she lay awake for hours, listening to the sounds of the town settling into night. Every creak of the floorboards made her tense. Every distant voice made her wonder if the bounty hunters were coming for her. But exhaustion eventually won, and she fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, Nathan arrived early with scissors and a determined expression. "I have been thinking about your hair." Felicity touched her long brown hair self-consciously. It fell to her waist when unbound, though she usually kept it pinned up. "What about it? In that wanted poster, I am guessing your hair is long. Most women wear it that way in those drawings." "Yes, long and loose around my shoulders. So we cut it, make you look different." The thought of cutting her hair made Felicity's stomach clench. Her mother had loved to brush it when Felicity was a child, singing old songs while she worked out the tangles. But her mother was dead, and Felicity could not afford sentimentality. "All right," she said. "Cut it." They did it in her room, with a sheet spread on the floor to catch the falling strands. Nathan worked carefully, evening out the length until her hair brushed her shoulders. When he was done, Felicity looked at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked older somehow, more severe. "It will grow back," Nathan said softly. "I know." She turned away from the mirror. "Thank you." Over the next few days, Nathan brought her meals and news from town. The bounty hunters were still around, asking questions and showing the poster to anyone who would look. But with her shorter hair and staying out of sight, Felicity began to hope that maybe they would move on without making a connection. Then Nathan came to her room one evening with a grim expression. "They have been asking about you specifically. Someone told them there was a new woman working at the general store arrived about the right time." Felicity's brief hope crumbled. "I need to leave, tonight." "Where will you go?" "I do not know. California, maybe, somewhere far from here." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Or you could come to my ranch." "What?" "It is an hour outside town, up in the hills. The bounty hunters do not know about it. You could stay there until they give up and leave." "Nathan, I cannot ask you to do that. If they find out you are hiding me, you could be arrested too." "You are not asking. I am offering." He took her hands. "Felicity, I know we have not known each other long, but I care about you, more than I have cared about anyone since my sister died. The thought of you running scared, always looking over your shoulder, it makes me sick. Let me help you, please." She looked into his eyes and saw only sincerity, no judgment, no fear, just a man who wanted to protect her because he thought she was worth protecting. "All right," she said. "But if this goes wrong, if they come for me, you have to let me go. Do not try to fight them. I will not have your blood on my hands too. Deal?" He smiled slightly. "Pack light. We leave before dawn." That night, Felicity packed her trunk with shaking hands. She folded her dresses, tucked away her few books, and made sure the wanted poster was still hidden in the Bible. Everything she owned fit into that one trunk, a life compressed into worn leather and brass fittings. Nathan came for her while the town still slept. He loaded her trunk onto his horse with practiced ease, then helped her mount behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the steady beat of his heart under her palms, and they rode out of Eldorado Canyon as the first light touched the eastern sky. The ranch was small but well kept. A cabin with 2 rooms, a barn for the horses and cattle, a chicken coop that needed repairs. The land stretched out in rolling hills covered with scrub brush and wildflowers, and in the distance, Felicity could see the rocky cliffs that gave the canyon its name. "It is not much," Nathan said as he helped her down from the horse, "but it is honest work and it is mine." "It is beautiful," Felicity said, and meant it. There was something peaceful about the isolation, the way the land seemed to go on forever. Nathan carried her trunk inside and set it at the foot of the bed in what he called the spare room, though it was clear this was where he slept. "You take this room. I will bunk in the main area." "Nathan, I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will, I insist." He smiled at her. "Now, are you hungry?" "I am not much of a cook, but I can manage eggs and coffee." They ate breakfast as the sun climbed higher, turning the desert gold. Nathan told her about his daily routine, about the cattle that grazed in the hills and the garden he was trying to coax out of the stubborn soil. Felicity listened, soaking in the normalcy of it, the simple pleasure of planning for a future. Over the following weeks, Felicity settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She mended Nathan's clothes, tended the chickens, and learned to make bread in the cast-iron Dutch oven. Nathan taught her to milk the cow and showed her the spring where the water ran cold and clear. They worked side by side in the garden, their hands dirty and their faces sun-burned, and Felicity felt something in her chest begin to unknot. She was still afraid. Every time Nathan rode to town for supplies, she spent the hours he was gone imagining the worst. But he always came back, and slowly, she began to believe that maybe this could work. Maybe she could hide here long enough for the bounty hunters to give up. Maybe she could build a life with Nathan in this place. They did not talk about what was growing between them, but it was there in every glance, every accidental touch. Nathan was unfailingly respectful, always sleeping in the main room even though Felicity could hear him tossing restlessly on the too-short sofa. She wanted to go to him, to close the distance between them, but fear held her back. What if she let herself love him completely and then had to leave? What if the law came and tore them apart one evening in late October as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky purple and orange? Nathan said. They left town. Felicity's head snapped toward him. The bounty hunters. Yes, they gave up, I think, moved on to search elsewhere. He paused. You could go back to the boarding house if you wanted, back to your job. Is that what you want? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Nathan turned to face her fully. What I want is for you to stay here, not because you are hiding, but because you want to. But that has to be your choice, Felicity. I will not trap you, even if the cage is comfortable. She thought about the boarding house, about the general store and the town, about the life she had been building before the bounty hunters arrived. It had been a good life, but it had also been a lonely one. Here with Nathan, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt like she belonged. I want to stay, she said, if you will have me. The smile that spread across Nathan's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. I will have you for as long as you will let me. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Felicity felt the last of her walls crumble. She kissed him back with everything she had, all the fear and hope and love she had been holding inside. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply. I know it is fast, but I do. I love you, Felicity Harper. I love you too, she whispered and felt the truth of it in her bones. That night, Nathan carried her to his bed, and Felicity finally let herself surrender to the feelings she had been fighting. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies with reverent touches. Nathan was gentle, patient, making sure she felt safe every moment. When it was over, they lay tangled together, skin to skin, and Felicity felt a peace she had never known. The months that followed were the happiest of Felicity's life. She and Nathan worked the ranch together, building up the herd and improving the cabin. They talked about getting married, about having children someday. Nathan rode to town less frequently, and when he did, Felicity no longer spent the time in paralyzing fear. She had found a home, and more than that, she had found a partner, but the past has a way of refusing to stay buried. It was a cold day in January of 1878 when Nathan came back from town with a troubled expression. Felicity was kneading bread dough, her hands dusty with flour when he walked in. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. Nathan hung up his coat and hat before answering. "There is a new sheriff in town, young fellow from California. He has been going through old wanted posters, putting them up on the board in his office." Felicity's hands stilled. "Mine. I saw it when I walked past. Your face clear as day." Nathan came to stand beside her. "I do not think anyone has made the connection yet. You look different now with your shorter hair and living out here. But Felicity, we need to think about what to do if someone does recognize you." The bread dough blurred as tears filled her eyes. "I thought we were safe. I thought it was over." "Hey," Nathan tilted her chin up gently. "We are safe. I am just being cautious, but maybe it is time we dealt with this properly." "What do you mean?" "I mean maybe we should go back to Missouri, face this head on. Get a real lawyer, tell your side of the story." Felicity pulled away, shaking her head. "No, Nathan, they will hang me. I killed a man. It does not matter that he was trying to force himself on me. I am a woman and he was a respected man in that town. No jury will believe me over his reputation." "You do not know that." "Yes, I do." She wrapped her arms around herself. "My father sold me like cattle to pay his debts. Do you really think the law will care about what happened to me?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Then we leave. Go to California or up to Oregon. Somewhere far enough that no one will connect you to that poster. And if they do, if we run and they catch us anyway, then we deal with it together." He pulled her into his arms. "Felicity, I am not letting you face this alone. Whatever happens, we are in this together. Do you understand?" She clung to him, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and soap and the outdoors. "I am so tired of running. I know. But if we have to run, at least we will be running together." They decided to wait out the winter before making any decisions. The Nevada territory could be brutal in the cold months, and traveling would be dangerous. In the meantime, Felicity stayed at the ranch while Nathan handled any business in town. It was not ideal, but it felt safer than risking exposure. The isolation should have been oppressive, but Felicity found herself content. She and Nathan fell into an easy domesticity, cooking meals together and reading by firelight in the evenings. On clear nights, they would bundle up and sit on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead while Nathan told her stories about constellations his sister had taught him. It was during one of these nights that Nathan asked her to marry him. There was no ring, no grand gesture. Just the two of them under a blanket, his hand warm in hers and his voice rough with emotion as he said, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Felicity said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They married in February, in the cabin with no witnesses but the chickens scratching in their coop outside. Nathan had bought a simple gold band from a traveling peddler, and Felicity wore her blue dress from the harvest dance. They spoke vows they wrote themselves, promising to love and protect each other for as long as they lived. When Nathan kissed her as his wife, Felicity felt something settle in her soul. She was not just running anymore. She had a reason to fight, to build, to hope. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and coaxing wildflowers from the desert soil. Felicity discovered she was pregnant in March, and the joy on Nathan's face when she told him was worth every moment of fear that had brought her to this place. But joy and fear often walk hand in hand, and it was only a matter of time before the past caught up to them. The knock on the cabin door came on a warm April evening. Nathan and Felicity were finishing dinner, talking about names for the baby, when the sound shattered their peace. They froze, eyes meeting across the table. "Stay here," Nathan said quietly, rising, but Felicity stood too. No, we faced this together, remember? Nathan opened the door to find the new sheriff standing on their porch, his badge glinting in the fading light. He was young, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a careful expression. "Evening," the sheriff said. "I am looking for Nathan Ellis." "That is me." Nathan's voice was calm, but Felicity could see the tension in his shoulders. "What can I do for you, Sheriff? I have some questions about a woman." "Felicity Harper. She is wanted for murder in Missouri, and I have reason to believe she might be in the area." The sheriff's gaze moved past Nathan to where Felicity stood frozen in the doorway. "That would not be her, would it?" Felicity felt the floor drop out from under her. This was it. The moment she had been dreading for over a year. She could run, but where would she go? And she would not leave Nathan to face the consequences alone. She stepped forward, chin high. "I am Felicity Harper." The sheriff nodded slowly. "I figured as much." "I am going to need you to come with me, madam." "No," Nathan moved to stand between them. "You are not taking her anywhere." "Sir, I understand this is difficult, but she is a wanted fugitive. I have a duty to uphold the law." "The law," Nathan's voice was hard. "The law that says a man can buy a woman like property. The law that says she has no right to defend herself when that man tries to force himself on her. That is the law you are upholding." The sheriff's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. "I do not make the laws. I just enforce them." "Then you are part of the problem," Felicity said quietly. She put a hand on Nathan's arm. "It is all right, I will go." "Like hell you will." Nathan turned to her. "Felicity, no. I am not letting you throw away your life for me." She looked at the sheriff. "If I go quietly, my husband faces no charges. Is that correct?" "That is correct." The sheriff pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "I am sorry, madam. I truly am." Everything happened very fast after that. Nathan grabbed the sheriff's wrist, preventing him from putting the handcuffs on Felicity. The two men struggled, and Felicity screamed at them to stop. The sheriff's gun came out, and for a terrible moment, Felicity thought one of them would die right there on their porch. Then a shot rang out, but it did not come from the sheriff's gun. Everyone froze. Standing at the edge of the porch was an older man with a marshal's badge and a smoking revolver pointed at the sky. "That is enough," the marshal said calmly. "Everyone take a breath and step back." The sheriff and Nathan separated, both breathing hard. The marshal holstered his weapon and climbed the porch steps. He was in his 50s, with gray threading through his dark hair and the weathered look of a man who had spent his life on the frontier. "Marshal Garrett," the sheriff said, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you were planning to make an arrest out here and thought I should supervise. Good thing, too, or we would have had a real mess." Marshal Garrett turned his attention to Felicity. "You are Felicity Harper?" "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. "And you are wanted for the murder of Marcus Turnbull in Missouri, August of 1876. "Yes, sir." There was no point in denying it. The marshal studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "Why do you not tell me what happened that night, in your own words?" So Felicity told the story again. About her father's debts, about being sold to Turnbull, about the night he came to her room and what he tried to do. She told it simply, without embellishment, her voice only breaking once when she described the moment she pulled the trigger. When she finished, the marshal was quiet. Then he said, "Sheriff, go wait by the horses." "But, sir." "That is an order." The sheriff left reluctantly. The marshal waited until he was out of earshot before turning back to Felicity and Nathan. "I have been a lawman for 30 years, he said. "I have seen a lot of things, good and bad. And one thing I have learned is that sometimes the letter of the law and the spirit of justice do not quite match up." "What are you saying?" Nathan asked. "I am saying that I read the file on this case before I came out here, and I noticed some interesting things. Like the fact that Marcus Turnbull had been accused of assaulting women before, but those accusations were always dropped. Like the fact that your father, Miss Harper, disappeared right after you ran. And like the fact that the wanted poster for you was issued by Turnbull's brother, who happened to be the judge in that county. Felicity felt a cold shock run through her. I did not know that. I figured you did not. That whole case smells rotten to me. A man with a history of violence tries to force himself on a young woman he essentially purchased, and she defends herself. That is not murder. That is self-defense. The marshal paused. The problem is, I cannot make the charges go away. Only a court can do that. So what do we do? Felicity asked, her voice small. The marshal looked at her, then at Nathan, then back at her. If I was to arrest you tonight, I would have to transport you back to Missouri. That is a long journey and a lot can happen on the trail. Prisoners escape sometimes, especially if they have help. Nathan's eyes narrowed. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am not saying anything. The marshal's face was carefully neutral. I am just a tired old man who took a long ride for nothing because when I got here, the woman I was supposed to check on was already gone. Probably headed for California if I had to guess. Shame I wasted my time. Hope flared in Felicity's chest, almost painful in its intensity. Why would you do this? Because I have daughters, the marshal said simply. And I would like to think that if one of them was in your situation, someone would help her. Now, I am going to go tell that eager young sheriff that we got bad information and there is no Felicity Harper here. And you two are going to disappear. Understand? Yes, sir, Nathan said. Thank you. Do not thank me. Just make sure I do not regret this. The marshal tipped his hat to them and walked back toward the horses. As soon as he was gone, Nathan pulled Felicity into his arms. She was shaking so hard she thought she might fall apart, but his steady presence held her together. Pack what we can carry, he said into her hair. We leave tonight. They worked quickly, taking only essentials. Clothes, food, the money Nathan had saved. Felicity hesitated over her trunk, the one that had carried her secrets for so long. Then she opened it and pulled out the Bible with the wanted poster tucked inside. She looked at the poster one last time. Her face stared back, younger and harder. Wanted for murder. $500. A whole life reduced to a few words and a bad drawing. Then she walked to the fireplace and threw it into the flames. Nathan came to stand beside her as they watched it burn. Leaving it behind, he asked. I do not need it anymore. She took his hand. I know who I am now, and I know that what I did was not murder, it was survival. They saddled 2 horses and loaded them with what supplies they could carry. As they rode away from the ranch in the darkness, Felicity looked back only once. The cabin was dark, the land quiet. It had been a good home, but home was not a place. Home was the man riding beside her, steady and sure. They rode through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Eldorado Canyon. By the time the sun rose, they were deep in the desert, following trails that Nathan knew from his years working cattle. They stopped only to rest the horses, eating dried meat and bread as they rode. 3 days later, they crossed into California. The relief Felicity felt was almost overwhelming. California was big, wild, full of people trying to start over. They could disappear here, build a new life where no one knew their names or cared about their past. They settled in a small town in the Sierra Nevada foothills, a place called Auburn where gold had been found 20 years earlier, and the rush had left behind a thriving community. Nathan found work as a ranch hand, and Felicity took in sewing. They rented a small house on the edge of town and told anyone who asked that they were from Nevada, looking for a fresh start. Felicity's pregnancy progressed, her belly swelling with the life growing inside her. Nathan was attentive and worried, reading every book about childbirth he could get his hands on. He built a cradle out of pine wood, sanding it smooth so there would be no splinters to harm their baby's soft skin. Their daughter was born in November of 1878, on a night when the wind howled outside and the midwife muttered prayers under her breath. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Felicity thought she might not survive it. But Nathan held her hand through it all, his face pale but determined, and when the baby finally came, squalling and red-faced, Felicity felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. They named her Clara, after Nathan's sister. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's gray eyes, and from the moment she was born, she had both of them wrapped around her tiny fingers. Life settled into a new rhythm. Nathan advanced from ranch hand to foreman, and Felicity's sewing became popular enough that she had more work than she could handle. They saved their money carefully, planning for the day when they could buy their own land again. Clara grew into a bright, curious child who asked endless questions and followed her father around like a shadow. When she was 3, Felicity became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. Their son was born in the summer of 1882, healthy and loud. They named him James, and he had his mother's stubborn streak and his father's gentle nature. The years passed peacefully. Felicity still had nightmares sometimes, dreams where she was back in Missouri facing a rope and a jeering crowd. But Nathan was always there when she woke, holding her until the fear passed. And during the day, surrounded by her children and the life they had built, she could almost forget that she had ever been anyone other than Mrs. Nathan Ellis, wife and mother. It was Clara who found the trunk. Felicity had stored it in the attic of their house, the one they had finally been able to buy in 1883. She rarely looked at it anymore. There was nothing in it she needed, just old dresses and a few books. But Clara, 9 years old and endlessly curious, had been exploring the attic on a rainy afternoon. "Mama," she called down, "there is a big trunk up here. Can I open it?" Felicity's heart skipped. "No, sweetheart, that is just old things." But when she went upstairs to check, Clara had already gotten the trunk open. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking at a water-damaged Bible. "Look, Mama, there is a paper in here." Felicity's blood went cold. She had burned the wanted poster. She remembered doing it. But then she realized what Clara was holding. It was not the original poster. It was a newspaper clipping, something she had forgotten was in the Bible. An article about Marcus Turnbull's death, calling it a brutal murder by an ungrateful girl. "What is this?" Clara asked, her eyes wide. Felicity knelt down beside her daughter, taking the clipping with shaking hands. She had thought this was over, had thought the past was truly buried, but here it was rising up to haunt her again. "It is a mistake," Felicity said quietly. "Something from a long time ago, but it says your name. Felicity Harper. That is you, is it not? Before you married Papa?" "Yes." There was no point in lying. Clara was too smart for that. "Did you really kill someone?" Felicity looked at her daughter's face, so earnest and confused, and made a decision. Clara was old enough to hear the truth, or at least a version of it. "Come downstairs," she said. "We should talk about this together, you, me, and your father." They sat in the kitchen while James played in the yard, blissfully unaware. Nathan came in from the barn, took one look at their faces, and knew something was wrong. "Clara found something," Felicity said quietly. She showed him the clipping. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "All right, I think it is time we told her." So they did. They told Clara the story, edited for her young ears but honest in its essentials. About Felicity's father and his debts, about the bad man who tried to hurt her, about the choice she had made to protect herself. They told her about running, about meeting each other, about the marshal who had helped them escape. Clara listened with wide eyes. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "So you are a hero, Mama. You saved yourself." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not know about hero. You are to me." Clara reached out and took her mother's hand. "You were brave, and you found Papa, and then you had me and James. That is a happy ending." Nathan cleared his throat, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "That is exactly right, Clara. Your mama is the bravest person I know." That night, after the children were asleep, Nathan and Felicity sat on their porch watching the stars. "I should have destroyed everything in that trunk," Felicity said. "Or maybe it is good that you did not." Nathan took her hand. "What you told Clara today, about being brave and making hard choices, she needed to hear that. And maybe someday, when she is grown and has to make her own hard choices, she will remember her mother's story and know that she is strong enough to face whatever comes. I just wanted to protect her from all of this. You did. You gave her a good life, a safe life. The fact that you had to fight for that life does not make it any less real." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I love you, Felicity Ellis. I loved you when you were running scared, and I love you now, and I will love you every day for the rest of my life. Even though I lied to you when we met, you did not lie. You just did not tell me everything right away. And honestly, if I am being truthful, I suspected something from the beginning." Felicity turned to stare at him. "What?" Nathan's mouth quirked in a small smile. "You jumped every time someone came into the store. You never talked about your past. You looked at strangers like they might be coming to hurt you. I knew you were running from something. I just did not know what until you told me. And you stayed anyway. And I stayed anyway." He pulled her close. "Because I saw who you were underneath the fear. I saw a woman who was kind and smart and strong. I saw someone worth fighting for. So when you finally told me the truth, it just confirmed what I already knew. That I had found someone rare and precious, and I was not going to let you go without a fight." Felicity buried her face in his shoulder, overwhelmed by the depth of her love for this man. "What did I do to deserve you? You pulled the trigger when you had to. You ran when you needed to. You survived." His voice was fierce. "And you let me love you, which is the greatest gift I have ever been given." They sat together as the night deepened, holding each other under the vast California sky. In the house behind them, their children slept safe and warm. Around them, the town hummed with the quiet sounds of ordinary life. And for the first time in years, Felicity felt truly at peace. The past was not erased. It never would be. But it no longer had power over her. She had survived, had built something beautiful out of ashes. And she had done it with a man who had looked at her darkest secrets and said, "I already knew, and I stayed." That was enough. That was everything. Years continued to roll by, each one adding its own texture to the life Nathan and Felicity had built. By 1890, Clara was 17 and stunning in a way that made Felicity's heart ache with protectiveness. She had her mother's resilience wrapped in her father's steady kindness, and more than one young man from town had come calling. James was 13, gangly and earnest, with a love for books that rivaled Felicity's own. Nathan's hair was showing silver at the temples now, and Felicity had found her first gray hairs the previous winter. But they had grown older together, their bodies changing in tandem, and there was comfort in that. The lines around Nathan's eyes deepened when he smiled at her, and she knew her own face bore the marks of years spent laughing and crying and living fully. They owned a good piece of land now, with cattle and horses and a proper house that Nathan had built with his own hands. It was not grand, but it was theirs, free and clear. The children had their own rooms, and there was a parlor where the family gathered in the evenings to read or play cards. Felicity had long since stopped looking over her shoulder. The wanted poster was ancient history. The bounty hunters, if any still cared, were looking for a desperate 22-year-old girl, not a 41-year-old mother of two with roots deep in California soil. She had even begun using her full name again in town, though she kept Nathan's surname. Felicity Ellis had a respectable reputation as a seamstress and a devoted mother. Felicity Harper was a ghost that no longer haunted her. But the past has a strange way of coming back, even when you think it is well and truly buried. It was a September afternoon when a stranger rode into Auburn asking questions. Felicity was in her sewing room, working on a wedding dress for the banker's daughter, when Clara burst in. "Mama, there is a man at the door. He says he is looking for anyone who might have known people from Nevada in the 70s. Felicity's hand stilled on the silk fabric. "What kind of man?" "He says he is a writer. Something about documenting the history of the mining towns." A writer was better than a lawman, but Felicity's instincts, long dormant, prickled to life. "Tell him I will be out in a moment." She took her time, smoothing her skirts and checking her reflection in the small mirror. The woman who looked back was respectable, settled, no trace of the frightened fugitive she had once been. She lifted her chin and went to face whatever this was. The man on her porch was perhaps 50, with wire-rimmed spectacles and the soft hands of someone who worked with pen and paper rather than tools or weapons. He had a satchel slung over his shoulder, bulging with notebooks. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, standing when she appeared. "I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Thomas Wyatt. I am writing a book about the mining communities of Nevada in the 1870s. "I see. And what does that have to do with me?" "I have been interviewing people who lived in those towns during that period. I was told you and your husband came from Eldorado Canyon." Felicity kept her face carefully neutral. "We passed through there briefly. I am not sure we can help you much." "Oh, I am interested in all stories, no matter how small." His smile was earnest, guileless. "Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? I promise not to take up too much of your time." Against her better judgment, Felicity invited him in. She offered him coffee, which he accepted, and they sat in the parlor. Through the window, she could see James leading one of the horses to the barn. "Normal life continuing on. So you lived in Eldorado Canyon?" Wyatt asked, pulling out a notebook. "We were there for a few months in 1877. My husband worked with cattle." "And what was the town like?" Felicity relaxed slightly. These were easy questions, the kind any visitor might ask. She told him about the mining operations, the diverse population, the harsh beauty of the landscape. She described the general store where she had worked and the boarding house run by Mrs. Chen. Wyatt scribbled notes, nodding along. Then he said, "There was an interesting case around that time. 2 bounty hunters came through looking for a fugitive from Missouri. A woman accused of murder. Do you remember anything about that?" Felicity's blood turned to ice, but she kept her expression mildly curious. "I might have heard something about it. Why do you ask?" "Well, it is a fascinating story. The woman, Felicity Harper, was accused of killing a man who had essentially purchased her from her father. There was evidence that the man was attempting to assault her when she shot him, but the local judge, who happened to be the victim's brother, pressed murder charges." Wyatt looked up from his notebook. "She disappeared and was never found. I have been trying to track down what might have happened to her." "That does sound fascinating," Felicity said, proud that her voice was steady. "But I am afraid I do not know anything about it. We kept to ourselves mostly." Wyatt studied her for a long moment, and Felicity had the uncomfortable feeling that he saw more than she wanted him to. But he just nodded and closed his notebook. "Well, thank you for your time, Mrs. Ellis. If you think of anything else, I am staying at the hotel in town for a few more days." He pulled out a card and left it on the table. Felicity showed him out, her heart pounding. As soon as he was gone, she locked the door and leaned against it, trying to calm her breathing. Nathan found her there when he came in from the fields. One look at her face and he was across the room, hands on her shoulders. "What happened?" She told him about the writer, about his questions. "He knows, Nathan, or at least he suspects. He is looking for me specifically." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Did he threaten you?" "No." "But what if he puts it together? What if he publishes a book with my name in it, saying I was in Eldorado Canyon? Someone might recognize me. The law might come." "Hey." Nathan tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. You have been Felicity Ellis for over a decade. You are a pillar of this community. You have children, grandchildren on the way someday. No one is going to believe you are some fugitive from Missouri. But what if they do? Then we deal with it, together, like we always have." He pulled her into his arms. "But I do not think it will come to that. This man is a writer, not a lawman. And even if he figures it out, what is he going to do? The crime is 14 years old. The people involved are probably dead or moved on, and you are clearly not a danger to anyone." Felicity wanted to believe him. She clung to him, breathing in the familiar scent of sun and sweat and home. "I am so tired of being afraid. I know, love, I know." That evening, after the children were in bed, Nathan went into town. He was gone for over an hour, and when he came back, his expression was satisfied. "I had a talk with Mr. Wyatt," he said. Felicity's heart jumped. "Nathan, what did you do?" "Nothing dramatic. I just explained that my wife values her privacy and we would appreciate it if our names were not included in his book. I may have also mentioned that we have friends in town who would not take kindly to anyone harassing respectable citizens." "You threatened him." "I suggested that discretion would be wise. There is a difference." Nathan hung up his hat. "He is leaving tomorrow. Said he got all the information he needed from other sources." Felicity did not know whether to laugh or cry. "You cannot protect me from everything." "Watch me." Nathan smiled, but there was steel underneath. "I have spent 15 years making sure you are safe and happy. I am not about to let some writer with too much curiosity ruin that." True to Nathan's word, Thomas Wyatt left Auburn the next day. Felicity watched from the window as he boarded the stagecoach, his satchel of notes going with him. She waited for the fear to subside, for the relief to set in. But all she felt was tired. That night, she pulled out the old trunk from the attic. Nathan found her sitting beside it, the water-damaged Bible in her hands. "I thought we were done with this," he said gently. "So did I." She opened the Bible to where the newspaper clipping still lay. "But maybe we will never be completely done. Maybe the past is just something we carry." Nathan sat down beside her on the floor. "Then we carry it together." She leaned against him, and together they looked at the yellowed clipping. In the dim light, the words seemed less threatening. Just ink on paper, a story about people who no longer existed. "I want to burn this," Felicity said finally. "All of it. The clipping, the Bible, the whole trunk. I want to be done carrying it. Then let us be done." They carried the trunk downstairs and out to the fire pit where they burned trash. Clara and James came out to watch, drawn by their parents' strange late-night activity. "What are you doing?" James asked. "Letting go of old things," Felicity said. "Things I do not need anymore." She pulled out the dresses first, the ones she had worn when she was young and scared. They went into the flames, the fabric catching quickly. The books followed, except for a volume of poetry that had been a gift from Nathan. That one she kept, then the Bible with its damning clipping. "Wait," Clara said. She took the Bible and carefully removed the clipping. "Can I see it?" Felicity hesitated, then handed it to her daughter. Clara read it in the firelight, her face thoughtful. Then she looked at her mother. "This story has a terrible ending," she said. It says you were never caught like that is a tragedy. But I know the real ending. You met Papa. You had us. You built a good life." She held the clipping over the flames. "This is not your story. This is what other people said about you, and we do not have to keep it." She dropped the clipping into the fire. It curled and blackened, the words disappearing into ash. "Thank you," Felicity whispered. They burned the rest of the trunk's contents, keeping only a few small mementos. A ribbon that had been her mother's. A letter from Nathan's sister. Things that held love instead of fear. When the fire had died to embers, Nathan took Felicity's hand. "It is over now," he said. "Truly over." And standing there with her husband and children around her, watching the last traces of her old life turn to smoke, Felicity finally believed it. The years that followed were full and rich. Clara married a schoolteacher from Sacramento, a kind young man who looked at her the way Nathan looked at Felicity. They had 3 children in quick succession, and Felicity discovered the fierce joy of being a grandmother. James went off to college in San Francisco to study law, determined to fight for people who needed help navigating the legal system. "I am going to make sure that people like Mama get justice," he told them before he left. People who had to defend themselves and got punished for it. Nathan and Felicity grew older together, their children grown and scattered but returning often for visits. They sold the cattle operation and rented out the land, living off the income and Nathan's work as a carpenter. Felicity continued her sewing, though more for pleasure now than necessity. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, Nathan took Felicity on a trip to San Francisco. They stayed in a hotel with running water and electric lights, marveling at how much the world had changed. They attended a symphony and ate in fancy restaurants, and Nathan bought Felicity a cameo brooch that she treasured. But the best moment came on their last evening, when they walked along the waterfront watching the sun set over the Pacific. Nathan stopped and turned to face her, taking both her hands. "You remember the night I asked you to marry me," he said, "out on the ranch under the stars. Of course I remember. I told you I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you, and I meant it. But Felicity, what I have gotten is so much more than I ever dreamed. You have given me a family, a home, a purpose. You have made every day an adventure, even the quiet ones, especially the quiet ones." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes. "You saved me, Nathan, in every way a person can be saved." "No," he shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just had the privilege of being there to see it, and to love you through it." He kissed her there on the waterfront, with the city bustling around them and the ocean stretching to the horizon. And Felicity thought about the girl she had been, terrified and running, convinced she would never be free of her past. That girl could never have imagined this life, this love, this peace. But she had fought for it, had survived and endured and refused to let fear win. And in the end, she had found something more valuable than freedom from the past. She had found a future worth living. They returned to Auburn to find that James had passed his examinations and was opening his own law practice. Clara's oldest daughter was engaged to be married. Life continued its forward momentum, and Felicity let herself be carried along in its current. Nathan retired fully in 1908, and they spent their days in gentle routine. Mornings on the porch with coffee, afternoons in the garden or reading, evenings with neighbors or family. Sometimes Felicity would look at Nathan across the dinner table, his hair fully silver now, his hands gnarled with arthritis but still strong, and be overwhelmed by the simple miracle of their life together. "What are you thinking?" he would ask, catching her staring. "That I am lucky," she would say. "That despite everything, I found you. We found each other," he would correct. "And I am the lucky one." It became a ritual of sorts, this exchange, a reminder of the truth they had built together. In the spring of 1910, Felicity fell ill. It started as a cough, nothing serious, but it lingered and worsened until she could barely get out of bed. The doctor came, prescribed rest and tonics, but privately told Nathan that it was pneumonia and Felicity was not young anymore. Nathan nursed her with patient devotion, sitting beside her bed and reading aloud when she was awake, holding her hand while she slept. Clara came to help, and James took time away from his practice. The house filled with family with love, but Felicity could feel herself slipping away. One night, when it was just her and Nathan, she squeezed his hand weakly. "I am not afraid," she whispered. "Of dying, I mean. I have had a good life, better than I ever deserved." "You deserved every moment of happiness and more," Nathan said fiercely. "Do not talk about deserving. You survived when others would have given up. You loved when it was easier to stay closed off. You built a family and a home out of nothing but hope and hard work. You deserved all of it." "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. Do not mourn too long. Find joy again. Tell our story, the real one, to our grandchildren. Let them know that love can heal anything if you let it." Nathan's face was wet with tears. "I promise. But Felicity, you have to fight this. I am not ready to let you go. I know." She reached up to touch his face. "But Nathan, I need you to understand. Even if I do not make it through this, I am at peace. Because I got to spend my life with you. I got to be loved by you. That is enough. That is more than enough." But Felicity was stronger than the illness. She fought her way back from the edge, and by summer she was well enough to sit on the porch again, wrapped in blankets despite the heat. Nathan barely left her side, and she teased him about being overprotective. "After 30 years, you should know I am too stubborn to die," she said. "I do know that," he replied, "but humor me anyway." She recovered slowly, regaining her strength day by day. And as she healed, Felicity had time to reflect on her life, on all the turns it had taken. The girl who had pulled the trigger in Missouri would never have believed this is where she would end up. Beloved, surrounded by family, respected in her community. It was not the life she had been raised to expect, but it was infinitely better. By fall, Felicity was well enough to attend Clara's daughter's wedding. She wore the cameo brooch Nathan had bought her in San Francisco and her best dress, and she danced with her husband to the scratchy music of a phonograph. They were both slower now, more careful with their steps, but they moved together with the ease of long practice. "Still the most beautiful woman in the room," Nathan murmured in her ear. "Still the most charming liar," she replied, but she was smiling. They lived 7 more years together, quiet years full of small joys. Morning coffee and evening walks, grandchildren visiting and neighbors stopping by. The comfortable silence of 2 people who had said everything that needed saying but still found pleasure in each other's company. Nathan died in his sleep in February of 1917, 2 weeks after his 67th birthday. He simply did not wake up one morning, peaceful in his bed with Felicity beside him. The doctor said it was his heart, worn out after a long life of hard work. Felicity held his hand and cried, but beneath the grief was gratitude. He had not suffered. He had died at home, surrounded by love, and he had given her 40 years of devotion, protection, and partnership. At the funeral, James gave a eulogy that brought everyone to tears. He spoke of his father's kindness, his quiet strength, his absolute devotion to his family. "My father was the best man I have ever known," James said. "Not because he was perfect, but because he chose love over everything else. He chose to see the best in people, and he taught us to do the same." After everyone had left, Felicity stood alone at Nathan's grave. She placed a hand on the fresh-turned earth and spoke to him one last time. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "You stayed. Through everything, you stayed. And you made me believe that I was worth staying for. Thank you for that. Thank you for all of it." She lived 3 more years as a widow, cared for by Clara and visited often by James and her many grandchildren. She spent her days sewing and reading and telling stories to anyone who would listen. Stories about the Old West, about the mining towns and the hard work of building a life on the frontier. And sometimes, when her grandchildren asked about how she met Grandpa Nathan, Felicity would tell them a different kind of story, about a girl who made a hard choice to save herself. About a man who looked at that girl and saw someone worth fighting for, about trust and secrets, and the moment when fear finally lost its power. "He knew who I really was," she would say. "All of it, the good and the bad, and he stayed. That is the most powerful kind of love there is. Not the love that only exists in perfect conditions, but the love that sees everything and chooses to stay anyway." Felicity Harper Ellis died on a warm June evening in 1920, surrounded by family. She was 65 years old and had lived long enough to see her great-grandchildren born. Her last words were to Clara, who sat holding her hand. "Tell them I was happy," Felicity whispered. "Tell them the ending was good," and it was. Despite the hard beginning, despite the years of fear and running, Felicity's story had ended exactly as it should have. With love, with family, with the knowledge that she had been seen and known and cherished, she was buried next to Nathan under an oak tree in the Auburn Cemetery. The headstone read simply, "Felicity Ellis, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother." There was no mention of Missouri, no hint of the wanted poster that had once hung with her name on it. Just the truth that mattered, that she had been loved, and she had loved in return. Years later, when Clara's children asked about their grandmother, Clara would pull out a box of letters. Letters Nathan had written to Felicity during their brief courtship, full of awkward poetry and earnest declarations. Letters Felicity had written back, careful and guarded at first, then increasingly open as trust grew. And at the bottom of the box was a single photograph, taken in San Francisco on their anniversary trip. Nathan and Felicity standing together, his arm around her waist, her head leaning on his shoulder. Both of them smiling, truly smiling, with the kind of happiness that comes from surviving everything the world threw at them and choosing each other anyway. "That is what love looks like," Clara would tell her children. "Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth fighting for. Your grandmother taught me that, and Grandpa Nathan proved it every single day of their lives together." The story of Felicity Harper, the girl who shot a man in self-defense and spent months running from the law, faded into history. But the story of Felicity Ellis, who built a life out of ashes and loved a man who saw past her fears to the strength underneath, that story lived on. Passed down through generations, a reminder that the past does not have to define the future. That redemption is possible. That love, real love, sees everything and stays anyway. And somewhere in the vast archive of Thomas Wyatt's papers, never published but carefully preserved, was a note in his neat handwriting. Suspected that Mrs. Felicity Ellis of Auburn, California, was actually Felicity Harper, wanted in Missouri in 1876. Chose not to pursue this line of inquiry. Some stories deserve to end happily, and this appeared to be one of them. Because in the end, that is what it was. A happy ending, hard-won and well-deserved. The kind of ending that only comes after surviving the worst and choosing, every single day, to keep going, to keep hoping, to keep loving. Felicity had hidden her own wanted poster in her trunk, carrying the weight of her past with her from town to town. But Nathan had seen it, had known who she really was, and had stayed. Had built a life with her, had loved her anyway and always, and that made all the difference.